But first, controversy at the T. For the past year or so, the MBTA has been working hard to get back on track, to cut costs and boost performance. But it often seems like it's one station forward, two stations back. The latest, the Globe report, which found the T forgave nearly half the $1.7 million in fines issued against Keolis, the commuter rail operator that left riders stranded, frozen, waiting for hours on multiple occasions in early 2015. And that's a decision Governor Baker is backing as well.
I mean, there's an element to that agreement that talks about force majeure. Force majeure has to do with sort of the equivalent of acts of God. It's pretty hard to argue that the winter of 2015 wasn't an act of God, and I had no intention, nor did the MBTA, of waiving any of their fines associated with on-time performance. They paid those fines, and they should have.
All fines aside, just last week another Globe report found the Green Line had the most derailments in the nation last year for a light rail line, with 7. This year so far, there have already been 5. And Democrats are screaming over moves toward privatization, the very same Democrats who voted in favor of handing over that power. Joining me to talk about all this are Brian Shortsleeve. Brian is Chief Administrator and Acting GM for the T. You still acting?
I am Acting GM and Chief Administrator, yes.
Okay, fine. Nice to see you. And State Representative Bill Strauss. He's a Democrat from Mattapoisett, House Chair of the Joint Transportation Committee. Good to see you both. If I can start with you here.
Sure.
At the time of these strandings and cancellations, Charlie Baker said, I'm done with excuses. Now, apparently, excuses are okay because $750,000 was returned. What changed?
You know, we fined Keolis close to $14 million so far. Even just this year, we've fined them over $1.5 million. So every month, we are aggressively finding them to focus them on improving the performance of the commuter rail.
Why'd you give them this money back?
In terms of the decisions made back in the winter of 15, as the governor laid out, they do have a contract, and the contract lays out a set of stipulations in which fines would be relieved based on extreme weather or acts of God. We didn't relieve any of the fines associated with on-time performance. Those were all levied. And since then, we've aggressively fined Keolis to the tune of, again, more than $14 million.
Why didn't you tell the public about this? The Globe had to do a public records request to even find out that the decision had been made to return them. I have to say, that troubles me more than the underlying act. Why didn't, you're a pretty forthright kind of character. Why didn't you just tell the public about it?
You know, I actually don't know the answer to that question. I mean, we talk about Keolis all the time. We have very active engagement with them. All of our information on the fines is public. So,
but you never talked publicly about this, did you? Tell the Globe story?
You know, the topic of the Keolis fines, we covered a lot in the fall. I actually wasn't the general manager of the fall, so I don't recall exactly what it was. But I will tell you that the fines are public. I mean, we publish every month what we're fining them.
Was the return of the money the right thing to do? Charlie Baker thought it was a good idea. Obviously, the acting GM thinks it's a good idea. Do you?
I don't agree with it. I'm
Why?
not being super critical of them, but I think that everything that resulted in fines for Keolis was a result of performance. May not have been on-time performance, but it all reflected the way they were doing the job under the contract. And to me, what it really points out to, and as I say, I'm not being super critical of the T or the administration, is the problem we have is the nature of the big contract itself. This is a
$2.7 billion.
Multi-billion-dollar contract, so it's really the biggest privatization issue we've got out there with regard to the T. And I think, frankly, what we need to do is, even though we're years off, we're left with the contract, now's the time to start the big procurement questions. What kind of contract really will not get us in these kind of issues about fines and performance, but something in the way of a contract that really deals with commuter rail as it should be.
Representative Strauss, I know you don't want to be super critical, to quote you, but in addition to the $2.7 billion, I think it was about a year ago or thereabouts, $66 million more, despite their spotty performance, was
points
added.
to the same problem. In effect, what's happening is the administration is, my word, floating Keolis through this contract period. And it's just, I don't think it's acceptable. So I think we have to take the opportunity to rethink the way the whole contract is
Briefly, do you disagree with that?
Well, I will thank Chairman Strauss. He's a terrific supporter of us at the T.
So you don't
obviously.
want to be super critical of him either?
No, I think what Chairman Strauss is talking about is a much different approach to commuter rail. For example, in the European model of commuter rail management, those tend to be 20 to 30-year contracts where the operator controls all the locomotives and has full revenue risk, for example. That's very different than what we are doing now. What we're doing at the T every day with the contract we have is trying to drive performance. We meet with Keolis daily. We meet with them at the gubernatorial level weekly, and we're pushing them hard to improve performance coming into winter.
Let's go to the Green Line for a second. Another public records request was necessary to get an internal audit that was completed 11 months ago, showing, and I know there's a dispute as to whether or not it's the most, but the Globe contended the most derailments for light rail in the country. Beyond the derailment issue, again, why do we, I mean, that Transportation Commission that was created because of people in the legislature meets all the time, to their credit. Why wasn't the public alerted to the fact that we had a record number of derailments, Brian?
Well, we publish the safety stats every month, and the Green Line has been a problem historically. There's really three areas of focus for us. One is operator speed, which we're monitoring closely. The second's the condition of the tracks. And we've replaced almost 23 miles of Green Line tracks over the past year. And then the third is the center truck and the wheels in the center truck, which in the case you mentioned was the issue. So I can tell you we are focused every day on making that Green Line run as efficiently as we can.
But I wouldn't have known about this until the Globe story, and it's been 11 months. Shouldn't I don't mean I mean the generic, shouldn't we have known about this?
You know, all those statistics are public, and it's maybe something we should, I mean, we publish every month, so perhaps it's something we should publish more aggressively, but safety for us is our number one focus.
Briefly, you concerned about this?
Very concerned.
Briefly.
And on this issue, this points to a completely different problem that I think we've got, which is the Green Line derailments were the result of track and wheel maintenance issues. And we can do all the good management over there that's possible, but if we're not spending what we need to, and I don't think we are, on the nuts and bolts of maintaining the system, our state of good repair is $7 billion.
Are we not spending enough because we don't have enough money? Or because
we're not spending enough. I think we need more money for transportation.
Which is not his decision, but yours and the governor's. One last thing. I mentioned this privatization thing. A lot of Democrats are screaming at the T and Charlie Baker for privatization. What did you expect them to do? You suspended the Pacheco law to give them the power to privatize, to save taxpayers' riders money, make it more efficient. They're doing exactly what I assume you thought they were going to do when they were given the power. Why complain?
I'm not complaining.
Your colleagues are complaining like crazy.
I understand, but we're 200 people, so not everyone is happy every day.
But you agree with me that Democrats should basically...
Look, we cast
zip
that
it, as
vote.
they say, right?
Well, I won't put it that way.
No, I'm serious. I mean,
we voted in this case because of the needs of the T to allow a level of privatization where we already have a lot of privatization at the T. My squawk will be if it occurs when core transportation services like the bus riders or the bus drivers, if we see privatization proposals on that, I think that would exceed
Are we going to see
mandate.
proposals on that?
Well, our focus initially has been a lot of our corporate functions. We've talked a lot about the money room. Even Bank of America doesn't run their own money room, so we think that's a real opportunity. We run private bus operations right now. We have contracts with Paul Revere. It's union drivers, Teamsters Local 25, and they run at about a 30% lower cost point than our internal operations.
Would there be union drivers if you privatized?
Well, there are right now in our private contractors.
Brian, we'd end with the question that was raised twice by Representative Strauss. Is there enough money in the system to do what you think needs to be done? Or does Charlie Baker have to belly up to the bar and say, we need more money for this?
Well, there's really two pieces of that. One is our day-to-day operations. We're working hard to close our operating deficit. But what Chairman Strauss is talking about more broadly is a big state of good repair backlog. I'll tell you that we haven't hit our spending targets for the last 2 years. So we had $1.1 billion available to the T last year. We only spent $750 of it. So my focus with the team is moving us to the point where we can invest over $1 billion a year. I think at that point, when we can put that kind of money out to work, then we can certainly talk about revenue. Right now, it's more of an execution challenge.
You got to hold it, Brian Shortsley. It's good to see you. Thank you
Jim,
for being
thanks.
Representative Strauss. We shall
Pleasure.
continue, I promise,
Okay.
in the near future.